The following video demonstrates the installation of DeckRite PVC deck covering over an existing wood deck. The basic installation technique between wood and concrete are very similar. The difference between the two is in the surface preparation. Preparing a concrete deck to receive the DeckRite membrane is a relatively easy procedure. Most existing concrete decks, especially older concrete, will likely require the use of DeckRite joint compound, patching concrete, and DeckRite joint filler. Contact the manufacturer with questions prior to your installation over concrete, or review the installation portion of the DeckRite technical manual. Although the DeckRite product will help hide imperfections in the substrate, the first step in any DeckRite installation is to prepare the existing surface prior to installing the DeckRite membrane. DeckRite is installed over both concrete and wood, so preparation of the substrate can vary from project to project. Ultimately, whether concrete or wood, the surface will need to be smooth, clean, and free of any ridges, peaks, or valley areas that may telegraph through the membrane. It is also important that you check the pitch or slope of the deck to ensure proper drainage. Improper drainage could cause damage to the existing structure or direct water flow towards door openings. Applications over an existing wood deck begin with the installation of half-inch pressure-treated plywood. The plywood is first cut to accommodate any protrusions on the deck, such as rail posts. The plywood is positioned against the adjoining structure and flush with the outside perimeter of the deck. Subsequent pieces of plywood should be installed as close together as possible. Butt the plywood together before attaching to the deck, leaving no more than a 1/16 inch gap between the pieces. Coated deck screws are used to secure the plywood to the deck. Although not required, you may also choose to glue the plywood to the deck using construction mastic in addition to screwing. Use no less than 15 screws per 4x8 sheet of plywood. The screws should be driven to a point just below flush with the top surface of the plywood. After the plywood has been attached using the recommended number of screws, it is always smart to inspect the deck for the need of additional fasteners. Walk over the surface of the new plywood. Any areas that dip or crack or move should receive additional fasteners. For new construction, use no less than 3/4 inch plywood over 16 inch on-center supporting joists. Also, if the DeckRite membrane is installed over a heated living space or an area with a ceiling, the use of standard plywood is allowed. Contact the manufacturer for details. Once the plywood has been securely attached, it is time to address the seams. Using a 4-inch to 6-inch flat trowel, apply DeckRite joint compound over the seams of the plywood. Remember, the joint compound is doing nothing more than helping hide the seam. Use as little joint compound as possible. Thoroughly fill all gaps of the plywood. Also fill knot holes, cracks, and any other imperfections in the plywood surface. Allow for the appropriate drying time as indicated on the joint compound package instructions. Sanding the joint compound will require the use of medium grit sandpaper. Inspect the plywood seams as you are sanding and identify those seams that may need additional joint compound. Uneven areas of the plywood may require the use of a vibrating sander, and in severe situations, a belt sander may be required to even out the plywood. Use a portable blower or broom to thoroughly remove the joint compound dust and debris remaining from the wood installation. It is critical that the plywood surface be dust and debris free. The adhesive used to glue down the DeckRite membrane will not work properly unless the surface is clean. Pre-cutting the membrane into manageable sized pieces is recommended to ease installation. However, prior to making any pre-cuts, it is important to recheck the deck measurements to allow for proper membrane placement. The first measurement will be in determining where the outside edge of the first piece of membrane will be located. If the deck is adjacent to a house or other structure, you may need to accommodate for the membrane being turned up the wall to create a flashing effect. Allow for the appropriate amount of membrane that will turn up the wall when determining your measurement. Installations over living areas where the membrane will also act as a waterproofing layer will require detailing similar to roofing details. These details could require extending the membrane behind siding, stucco, or making a saw cut for metal riglet to ensure watertight integrity. Once you have located the line that the outside edge of the membrane will follow, check the length of your deck. It is always best to add approximately 3 to 4 inches to the length of your measurement to allow for an over-the-edge termination. Some installations may require that the fascia boards located on the outside of the deck be totally encapsulated. If that is required on your deck application, be certain to allow for it in determining the length of your pre-cut membrane. Pre-cut your DeckRite membrane on the deck or on a clean, dry surface nearby. Using a tape measure, mark the rolls at your predetermined lengths. Then make your cuts square and precise using a razor knife or a pair of heavy-duty scissors. Once the appropriate length piece has been cut from the roll, roll up the pre-cut piece, making certain that any dirt or debris is wiped off while rolling. Position the pre-cut piece of membrane on the deck and roll it out. Align the edge of the membrane on the guide, indicating where the membrane edge will track during installation and adhering. Once the membrane is properly aligned, apply weighted objects at the opposite end of the roll you will be gluing first. A toolbox or an extra pail of adhesive will usually work well. Once the weight is in place, fold back the membrane, exposing the plywood area you will be gluing. The glue used for installation over plywood is a water-based adhesive. It is a one-surface adhesive applied to the plywood surface, requiring the use of a medium nap roller for application. The adhesive is the consistency of thick paint and will require stirring before use. It is important the adhesive does not contaminate the seaming area of the membrane. To safeguard against this, apply another mark 1 inch from the edge of the membrane. This mark will indicate how far the adhesive can be applied without getting into the seaming area. Additional safeguards would be to install 1 inch wide masking tape on the back edge of the membrane or on the plywood surface. The tape is then removed prior to hot air welding the seam. Fold back the end of the membrane that you will be gluing. It is best to work in manageable lengths to ensure that the adhesive does not dry before you are ready to apply the DeckRite membrane. Usually, 10 to 15 foot sections will work well. Apply a liberal coat of the DeckRite water-based adhesive to the plywood. Coverage rates for the adhesive are between 120 and 150 square feet per gallon. Apply the adhesive completely up to the walls of the structures, posts, and other penetrations. The DeckRite membrane should be laid into the adhesive immediately. With the help of a co-worker, reapply the membrane over the glued area. Make certain that you follow the guide marks as the membrane is positioned into the adhesive. Once the membrane is installed over the glued area, take a stiff bristle push broom and sweep over the glued area to help ensure total adhesive contact under the membrane. Any air pockets can also be removed utilizing the push broom. It is best to pre-cut around posts prior to adhering around them. Use a utility knife or scissors to make these cuts. The cuts should be made tight around the base of the protrusions. After the cuts are made, apply the adhesive around the post. If needed, use a paintbrush or smaller roller to apply the adhesive under existing railings and complete the installation of the membrane. Once you have finished the installation of one end of the membrane, go to the opposite and follow the same procedure. Fold the membrane back to the place where you first began installing the adhesive. It is important that all of the wood receive adhesive. Do not leave any areas without glue, as they may show after the installation is complete. The next piece of DeckRite membrane will overlap the initial piece 1 inch. Follow the same procedures for installing as indicated with the beginning piece. You can walk on the membrane immediately after it is installed. The water-based adhesive will typically take 2 to 3 hours before it begins to get sticky. It is best to wait for a couple of hours before you attempt to weld the seams using the hot air gun. If the adhesive has not had adequate time to dry, the blowing air of the hot air gun may separate the membrane from the adhesive, causing bubbles and air pockets. A general rule to follow, if possible, is to adhere in the morning and hot air weld your seams in the afternoon. The DeckRite membrane will weld together between 450 and 500 degrees Fahrenheit. There are numerous hot air guns available in the industry that will reach these temperatures and properly weld the membrane. DeckRite recommends the Leicester Triac with a 40mm tip. The tip of your hot air gun is critical in the seaming process. Because of this, industrial paint strippers and shrink wrap guns are not proper hot air tools for the DeckRite product. If you do not have access to the proper hot air gun needed, contact DeckRite for assistance. Hot air guns have a rheostat that regulates temperature. For the Leicester Triac, the proper heat setting will be between 6.5 and 7 when welding the DeckRite membrane. Turn the rheostat to 7 and allow the gun to heat up for 2 to 3 minutes. Place the tip in between the 2 layers of membrane and begin slowly moving down the seam, welding the membrane. Use a silicone roller to follow behind the hot air gun to compress the 2 layers together. The edge of the roller should be parallel with the tip opening. Continue down the seam at a rate of approximately 2 feet per minute. The nozzle opening of the hot air gun should stay completely between the two layers of membrane, allowing the nozzle tip to protrude out the seaming area no more than 1/8 inch. A properly welded seam is accomplished when the top layer of the bottom sheet is welded into the bottom layer of the top sheet. With the introduction of hot air, the inside layers of membrane will become liquid or molten. The silicone roller compresses the two layers together while they are in this molten form. When complete, the seam has been transformed into a one-piece monolithic seal. To test the seaming technique and integrity, hot air weld 2 pieces of scrap DeckRite membrane as indicated in the video. Allow the seaming area to cool for several minutes and then pull the seam apart. A properly welded seam, when pulled apart, will expose the polyester reinforcement inside the membrane. If the seam does not delaminate, it is likely that the hot air gun was moved down the seam too quickly or the heat setting on the rheostat was not high enough. Try another area of seam at a slower pace before raising the temperature. The texture of the membrane and the print pattern of the membrane will help disguise the seaming area. Even so, the seam will be slightly visible when close up. The seaming area will not take away from the aesthetics of the application, but they are critical for watertight applications. Remember to always shingle the DeckRite seams in the direction of the deck slope. There are various perimeter termination alternatives for the deck application. The most popular is the use of powder-coated aluminum termination bar and matching color screws. The DeckRite membrane is taken over the outside edge of the deck. Use a spacer guide or level to apply the termination bar evenly and consistently down the edge of the deck. The screws are installed through pre-punched holes every 6 inches on the termination bar. Powder-coated termination bar can also be used in deck-to-wall details. In addition to the termination bar, there are several other perimeter details such as coated metal or 2-piece PVC fascia. Consult the DeckRite technical manual for details. When the DeckRite application is complete, your deck will be protected by a state-of-the-art product that will offer years of low-maintenance performance. Contact DeckRite for recommended care and maintenance of your DeckRite deck installation.